Hunter.
Good morning. The Grand Traverse Bay watershed is almost 976 square miles of land. It covers major portions of Antrim, Grand Traverse, Kalkaska, and Leelanau counties, and encompasses 55 townships and municipalities. Grand Traverse Bay stretches along 132 miles of Lake Michigan shoreline, spans 10 miles at its widest point, stretches 32 miles to its base in Traverse City, and is 590 feet at its deepest point. Grand Traverse Bay is one of the few remaining high-quality embayments in the Great Lakes, and arguably has the highest water quality of the larger Lake Michigan bays. Almost 200,000 people call this watershed home, and that number basically doubles during the warmer months. For 7 years, Heather Smith has been the Grand Traverse Baykeeper at the Watershed Center, armed with a bachelor's degree in biology from Michigan State University and a master's in water resources from the University of Wisconsin. Heather and her team of scientists, researchers, and volunteers are out there protecting the very thing many of us take for granted: the clear waters, the peaceful woods, the calm, and the quiet. Take the shape of coordinating with local governments on protective policies, advocating for decisions that protect water, coordinating volunteers, monitoring in the field, and in being a resource for concerned community members. Ultimately, is all about speaking up for the environment and protecting this incredible natural beauty. As Baykeeper, Heather advocates for the environmental health of the Grand Traverse Bay watershed by serving as the liaison between concerned citizens, regulatory bodies, municipalities, planners, and developers. She and her team conduct outreach and education programs, provide oversight and comments on the proposed projects that require permits wherever our water quality could be affected, and again, monitoring our area's waters. In fact, in the last few days, an action was started against a producer allegedly fouling the watershed near Elk Rapids by the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. The Watershed Center also deals with all the other things that communities have to deal with: adjusting to climate change, failing infrastructure, microplastics, stormwater runoffs, nutrients and toxins, erosion, invasive plant species, and emerging threats like PFAS. So please welcome our very own Baykeeper, Heather Smith.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good deal. Thank you so much, John, for that wonderful introduction. I feel like you've covered half of the material I was going to go over today, which is who I am and what I do. Not really, but I appreciate you taking the time to so thoroughly explain my work at the Watershed Center. So today, can everybody see my introduction slide? Good deal. I see Sam nodding her head. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about engaging communities in water advocacy. So I'm going to focus on work as the Grand Traverse Baykeeper, but talk specifically about how we engage folks in that conversation, how we ask people to speak up for clean water in our community. So really quick agenda. I'm going to first introduce the Watershed Center, who we are and what we support, and John did a really great job, as mentioned, about giving folks an idea of what we do. I'm going to talk about effective local advocacy, or the Watershed Center's definition of effective local advocacy. I'll explain our Watershed Warriors community advocate program, where community members are speaking up for clean water. Talk a little bit about the obstacles and challenges of that program, some reflections on how to get folks involved in water advocacy, and then we'll have some time for questions. So, as John mentioned, the Watershed Center, we advocate for clean water in Grand Traverse Bay. We work to preserve and protect the watershed. Here is a map of the Grand Traverse Bay watershed. That light blue outline is the watershed. As mentioned, it spans 4 counties. Just kind of a smaller portion of Leelanau County, with that eastern side draining to Grand Traverse Bay. The Watershed Center has been advocating for clean water for since about 1994. So that was when a group of citizen advocates who wanted to make sure there was a voice for the Bay and issues that impacted water quality came together. And so the Watershed Center was formed. We're close. Next year, we'll be celebrating our 30th year anniversary. Our mission is to advocate for clean water in Grand Traverse Bay and protect and preserve the watershed. And we do this through a number of different things. We protect the water that you love by working on policies and programs that are about preservation and conservation. We restore waterways that have been degraded. And then we really connect people to clean water. We have a number of volunteer programs where we are really getting folks involved in protecting our water. So I wanted to briefly start with a map of the Great Lakes watershed, just to remind folks that watersheds are nested. So all of this colored area is the entire Great Lakes watershed or Great Lakes Basin. And you can see some of these lighter pastels are the individual lakes watershed. So within the Great Lakes watershed, we have all of these smaller lake watersheds. So you can see here about half of Michigan, about half of Michigan and a good portion of Wisconsin drains to Lake Michigan. Within that subwatershed, that Lake Michigan subwatershed of the Great Lakes Basin or watershed, we have the Grand Traverse Bay watershed, and you can break that up to even smaller watersheds. We have 9 subwatersheds of the Grand Traverse Bay watershed, and you can see that yellow area in Leelanau County, we call that the West Bay area of our watershed. This is a large watershed, as mentioned by John. It's almost 1,000 square miles. We have, as mentioned, 4 counties. Within those counties, we have 44 townships that we touch in 11 municipalities. So that's lots of local units of government making decisions in our watershed. So there's a lot of opportunity for advocacy at that local level. And this large watershed may feel arbitrary, but the lines are really important to the Grand Traverse Bay watershed. The Watershed Center Grand Traverse Bay, because it helps us focus our work on our mission, which is protecting clean water in Grand Traverse Bay. The Grand Traverse Bay watershed has a number of water quality threats, and I'm sure that folks are familiar with some of these threats. These threats are a little bit more diffuse than other water quality threats that we see in other regions in the Great Lakes, like perhaps in the UP where mining is a really big issue, or in some of our really urban areas like Milwaukee and Detroit, where we have really big areas of legacy contaminants. In the Grand Traverse Bay, very diffuse, these threats, and many of them stem from development and land use practices. So we have stormwater runoff, which can lead to nutrients and sediments and toxins reaching our water. We're losing our wetlands and our natural shorelines, our riparian vegetation, or that vegetation at the land-water interface. We have a lot of loss of woody debris in our streams, rivers, and lakes. That means when trees die, they naturally fall into water, and they provide really great habitat for the animals and fish that live there. And so we're seeing a lot of loss. Improperly maintaining on-site wastewater systems or septic systems. We're dealing with invasive species, things like the New Zealand mud snail, and now rock snot or didymo, which you may have heard. It's another big threat in northern Michigan. And of course, we have the zebra and quaggas who have totally changed the system as well. And then we're also dealing with things like emerging contaminants. Those are PFAS and microplastics, those toxins that we're just starting to understand the threat that they're posing to human health, the threat that they're posing to wildlife. So I really quickly wanted to talk about the Grand Traverse Baykeeper program because I think it can be a very confusing term. We laugh at the Watershed Center because folks will often call it the beekeeper or the bay watcher. And that Grand Traverse Baykeeper term comes from the International Waterkeeper Alliance. So as the Baykeeper, it's my job to be the eyes, ears, and voice of the Grand Traverse Bay. And this was handed down from the Waterkeeper Alliance. We're part of this network, this global movement for clean water. The Waterkeeper Alliance is the parent organization. There are over 320 member organizations that work on a very hyper local level. And that goal is to fight for swimmable, fishable, and drinkable water. So each Waterkeeper is slightly different in their challenges and their goals and their strategies, but we are all boots on the ground, community, grassroots, bottom up, who are fighting hard for clean water in our areas. There are a number of Waterkeeper groups in the Great Lakes region. There's the Milwaukee River Keeper, the Yellow Dog River Keeper in the UP, Detroit River Keeper, the Lake Erie Keeper, Buffalo, Niagara River Keeper, St. Lawrence River Keeper. I might be missing a few, but several organizations in the Great Lakes in this Waterkeeper movement who are working for clean, healthy Great Lakes. And our parent organization, the Waterkeeper Alliance, they provide us with networking, training, opportunities, legal services, and advice, and much more. So at the Watershed Center, we have a few key messages to address the top threats of clean water that we're seeing in our community. So it's protecting riparian vegetation, protecting wetlands, coastal resiliency best practices. So that's ensuring that our coastal communities are able to grapple or handle really variable Great Lakes water levels, this increased storminess and changing climate that we're seeing. Proper stormwater management is a big focus of ours, ensuring that stormwater is treated and infiltrated or soaked into the ground on site instead of running over a bunch of cement, picking up pollutants and making its way untreated into the nearest water body. We're advocating for on-site wastewater management or septic management, and we're really excited about the progress that's happening in Leelanau County in terms of an ordinance to address that. We have several other communities that are doing that as well. We're focused on invasive species control and prevention, and working really with our local invasive species network to ensure that we're spreading the message about clean, drain, dry. And then we're tackling emerging contaminants, things like PFAS, microplastics, coal tar sealants, other kind of new emerging threats that we're seeing in our watershed. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about effective local advocacy and how we define advocacy at the Watershed Center. So we are really hyper local focused. We are just working within our watershed and really filling that niche, the local government advocacy around water. So we feel at the Watershed Center that we're most effective at the local level. We can have these long-term relationships with local elected and appointed officials, municipal staff. It's direct personal engagement. We're able to be at the meetings and have coffee and know our decision makers. We have relevant local expertise, right? We are the boots on the ground that are doing the monitoring, that are doing the restoration in our watershed. And there's really a gap in water advocacy at the local level. There are a number of really great groups that are doing statewide water advocacy, Michigan League of Conservation Voters, and others for the love of water, a number of groups, as well as regional work. We have Healing Our Waters Coalition, the Alliance for the Great Lakes, a number of really great, powerful organizations that are tackling those regional or federal policies and decisions. And so we really feel at the local level, it's our job to step in and we can make a meaningful difference. Local governments can also respond to citizen concerns and engagement in a way that our state and federal groups cannot do, right? As I mentioned, we can have coffee with our local units of government. Decision-making seems to happen quicker. We feel like as the public, we have a lot more ability to impact those local decisions. And when we talk about effective local advocacy, what we mean is using our voices to make real change. We want to ensure that we are presenting potential solutions to an issue. We want to ensure that those solutions are based in science. We want to ensure that we are, every time a decision or policy is made, that we are the voice for clean water, that we're standing up for our values and goals. By effective, we mean produced a desired result. It creates answers and clears calls to action. We're speaking up to the correct decision maker at the correct time. And oftentimes that can be tricky to figure out who and what that is. And then local, right? We're engaging in and around our community. At the local level, we're able to bring our expertise into the decision makers and offer some real solutions. So effective local advocacy, making real change, speaking up at the right time, engaging in local issues, and those are all really rooted in communications and community organizing. Our key principles for effective local advocacy, we want to make sure that we have clarity on the issue, right? What does the literature say about best practices? We work with a number of communities, so we can kind of do a survey. What have other communities experience in this realm? If we're going to be advocating for a wetland setback, what do other communities do? What other type of rules do they have? What challenges have they encountered, and what type of successes are they seeing? We're always ensuring that we are presenting accurate information in our argument. We really want to have clarity about the issue, understanding what we're asking our local decision makers to do. Again, identifying the decision makers. Who are the decision makers? What standards are they using to make the decision? When is that happening? That process can be very tricky. Understanding when that decision's happening and which individual decision maker comes into action or play is really important. It's also important to understand who are on our boards and commissions. Do we have allies? Are there any historical cues on how someone may have voted or approached an issue in the past? Figuring out what drives the decision makers, getting to know the decision makers is something that we really focus on at the Watershed Center. So local decision making. At the Watershed Center, we tend to work with townships and municipalities when they're updating master plans, when they're updating or writing new sections of zoning ordinances or police power ordinances like stormwater ordinances, perhaps when they're making resource decisions, like how do they manage a tree fund, or how are they managing their own parklands? And then permit application, when a zoning permit comes in, when there's development on the line, those are all local decision-making opportunities that the Watershed Center tries to have a positive impact on. So our policy themes, I kind of alluded to this in a previous slide, but really it's that climate resiliency. How can we adjust to this changing climate? How can we understand this changing climate and ensure that we're going to stay resilient in the face of these changes? Great Lakes coastal resiliency, that might be another term that folks have heard recently. It's one that's gaining kind of a lot of momentum in the research practitioner world, but ensuring that we're able to withstand and recover from these variable Great Lakes water levels and this change in climate that we're seeing. On-site wastewater management, shoreline vegetation, things like zoning ordinance provisions that preserve trees, or riparian buffer provisions, water's edge setbacks. We're really pushing our communities to have deeper water edge setbacks, particularly on the Great Lakes, because we see such variability in water levels. Wetland protection, things like wetland ordinances that sit at the local unit of government, or even wetland setbacks, as I mentioned. Proper stormwater management. Our larger communities within the state or within the country, their stormwater is, there's some state oversight for their stormwater, state and federal. They're part of an MS4 permitting process. When you have communities that are not large enough to qualify for those MS4 permits, so all the communities in our watershed, so I think it's under 50,000 people, we don't have any state or federal oversight for stormwater management. So that's all left up to our townships and our municipalities. Again, emerging contaminants and toxins, ensuring that we're able to respond and have policies to deal with these emerging contaminants and toxins, and then invasive species prevention and control. So now you know a little bit more about the Watershed Center and the things that we're dealing and how we think and feel about local advocacy, and how we feel that it's really our job to fall into this local advocacy gap. I want to talk about our Watershed Warriors program. This is where individuals can and do participate in local advocacy around water quality protection. So first, we believe that everybody should have a say in decisions around water. Here in the Grand Traverse region, more than anywhere in our state, is water is our lifeblood. It's why we live here. It's why we have a booming tourism and recreation industry. It's why where retirees are coming up here. People are choosing to relocate here, especially after there's more kind of flexibility in this work from home environment post global pandemic. But sometimes there's a disconnect in our value for water and how decisions are made around water. And this is where we're trying to influence those decisions. The overarching goal of the Watershed Warriors program is to empower people affected by water issues to have a say in the decisions around water. We have several supporting goals of the Watershed Warriors program. We want to educate participants about current and potential threats to water quality and opportunities to mitigate or deal with those threats. We want to inform participants about local government systems, including how decisions are made, which unit of government's making what decision, and what kind of tools there are for protecting clean water. We want to empower participants to effectively speak up about clean water in their communities at these opportune times. And we really want to support and encourage participants, our Watershed Warriors, to become community leaders, to step up into maybe lake association boards, apply to be on a planning commission, or even run for local office. We've tried kind of two iterations of the Watershed Warriors program. First, in about 2007, we started alerting some of our supporters to some of the advocacy we were doing. We just sent out these email alerts when decisions were being made, and we gave some reasoning behind our advocacy message, and we gave information about how to speak up. We did get a grant from Waterkeeper Alliance. That's that parent organization I mentioned, that global nonprofit. And they allowed us to kind of reconsider the program, the Watershed Warriors program. So version 2 was piloted in 2021. And it really consists of both that reactive engagement, where we see an issue and we can alert people. We give email updates on issues, and we have alerts for training opportunities, and then that proactive engagement. We have an annual boot camp where we bring folks into the program and do a little kind of tutorial on local advocacy, local governments, and the threats in our area. We have quarterly or biannually training and networking opportunities. We have an e-news that goes out twice a year that highlights advocacy successes and challenges. And we really are trying to connect our advocates to each other. So there's that proactive engagement. This slide is intended to give you an idea of who our community advocates are. So in our experience, these are the type of individuals that tend to be involved in our advocacy, our Watershed Warriors advocacy program. And many of these individuals are part of several of these programs. We have partner groups like other environmental nonprofits like NEMAC or Northern Michigan Environmental Action Council, or Saving the Birds Through Habitat. Other folks that have a passion about clean water, they might be involved in our program. Lake Association members, and we have many folks that are Lake Association members, maybe even serving on a board that are in our program. Of course, anglers, paddlers, boaters, birders. Lots of times people that are spending time out in the water or in these wetlands. They have a real care for these natural spaces, so they tend to be in our program. Retirees with a little bit more time to focus on their own interests. We have a lot of retirees. We have several of our advocates from other volunteer programs, folks in our stream monitoring program, or folks that come to our beach cleanups. They're interested, and once they know a little bit about the work that they do, they're interested in becoming a voice for clean water. And then oftentimes we find ourselves on the same side as neighbors of a proposed development. Maybe they have concerns about environmental impacts, like they've been bringing their kids to the wetland for years and they've been playing with frogs, and this development comes in and wants to fill in wetlands. Will they share our concern because they're connected to that special space? I'm going to talk a little bit about the obstacles and challenges that we've encountered since coordinating this community advocacy program in the last several years. First, there are some obstacles in engaging community members. Recruitment's difficult, spreading the word about our program, trying to find outlets where we know folks have a desire to protect natural spaces and speak up for clean water, getting the message to those caring people. Political decisiveness. Oftentimes, I think folks shy away from advocacy thinking it's bipartisan, but as we know, advocacy doesn't have to be political. It doesn't have to mean lobbying. There's needs to be and is bipartisan support for clean water. Shyness and lack of confidence. Some folks are a little bit concerned about speaking up. Maybe they're a little bit concerned or unfamiliar with writing a letter or giving public comment. Busy lives, right? Everybody's juggling a million things. So tapping into people, especially when we have these really short turnaround times to act. We might find an agenda item a week or 3 days before the meetings happen. And so we really have to act fast, turn around fast. And then limited issue interest. Maybe folks are really only interested in bird habitat and wetlands, and maybe they're not so interested in proper management of on-site wastewater or septic system. So ensuring that we're engaging folks across the watershed when maybe something's not happening in your township or your municipality, or maybe something's happening, but it's not about a topic that necessarily resonates with you. And then it's obstacles in reaching the decision makers, whether that's a county commission or planning commissioner or staff, or someone on a Parks and Recs committee. Oftentimes these decision makers are volunteers. They are volunteers that have joined the Planning Commission. So they tend to be staff dependent. They rely on maybe the planning and zoning administrator to help guide them through a decision on how to maybe evaluate a site plan review on the Planning Commission. So that can be really difficult because you already have this kind of built-in reliance on staff. It's very easy for our townships and municipalities to defer all hard decision-making to the county or the state. We see it all the time with wetlands. Folks will say, well, Eagle that's the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. They're responsible for issuing wetland fill permits. If it's bad for the environment, Eagle won't issue a permit, therefore the township doesn't want to touch wetlands, which, as we know, is not true. And there is a spot for local units of government to ensure wetlands, shorelines, vegetation, all our water is protected. Sometimes it's hard to reach our decision makers. Maybe our comments come in too late. If we're reacting to an agenda item that we see on a Monday morning and the meeting's on a Wednesday evening, and they start receiving comments on Wednesday, they might not have time to even read our comments. And then of course there's that groupthink phenomenon. When you're on a board or commission and everybody else thinks the project's a great idea, it tends to be hard for people to stick out their necks and say, hey, what about water? Or what about wetlands if no one else on the board or commission has a concern? I'm briefly going to go over some reflections in our water advocacy program. To kind of wrap up here. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for about 5 or 6 years. And we think there's a lot of success. There are a number of opportunities that we have. We feel that participants, and we have surveyed our participants, so we know this to be true. They have more knowledge and confidence and power around issues. They know more about the importance of wetlands. They feel like they know more about how to properly manage their own on-site septic system. Participants connect to one another, and it's empowering, and it helps build community. And oftentimes our participants become community activists in other issues. Maybe they're thinking about water, and they're taking some action on wetlands at the local level. Well, they might always also realize that they're also concerned about affordable housing now that they've kind of understood more about how local units of government work. There are other areas where they tend to kind of trickle into other community issues. Participants may reevaluate their own behavior and beliefs. Once you learn a little bit about how important it is to have shoreline trees, maybe you decide, hey, I'll keep all of my shoreline trees, or only prune a few of them instead of remove them. And finally, participants build confidence, and they take on leadership roles. As we mentioned, we've had some great success in having participants jump to lake association boards, or even apply for local government appointed boards, or run for local office. So finally, reflecting on our Watershed Warriors program and our advocacy in general, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? There are no two issues or no two communities that are the same. It's really the long game that helps keep wins and loses in perspective. Hey, maybe a development that we didn't want to see, maybe a very harmful piece of a development, like a bunch of wetland fill for parking lot, maybe that went through, but let's not lose sight that we saved a few trees on the way. And let's be sure that we can look forward and know that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We have to be ready for the next issue. Citizen advocacy is a specialized form of volunteer management. All of the challenges and rewards of volunteer management programs, like people come and go, and we have to harness energy to achieve our priorities. That is the same with coordinating citizen advocates. At the bottom of it all, it's all about relationship building, right? It's about building relationship with our community advocates, building trust. It's about building relationships with our partner organizations. It's about building relationships with our local units of government and our decision-making boards. So with that, that's all really I have for you today. I'm inviting everybody to join us in our Watershed Warriors program. Our water needs your voice. I'm sure that all of you are probably speaking up in your own way, or perhaps you're doing it as a group, as Leelanau Indivisible. But I would love to figure out how the Watershed Center can work more with Leelanau Indivisible as a group, or as individuals who live, recreate, work, or play in our watershed. So I want to open it up to any questions now. That's all I have for you today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Heather. Susan Whedon has a question. Susan, do you want to ask Heather? You need to unmute, Susan.
With the Supreme Court decision about wetlands, I was wondering if there will be repercussions in our area about how we maintain our wetlands.
Yeah, thank you, Susan, because that's a really important question. So Susan is likely talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Sackett decision that came about maybe 2 weeks ago from the Supreme Court, which narrowed the definition of waters of the United States, or what we call WOTUS, narrowed the federal definition of what constitute as a what constitutes as a protected wetland under the federal definition by the EPA. Susan, we're still understanding how that specifically affects our region and our state. In some ways, we're really lucky. Actually, in a big way, we're really lucky. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act is a wetland protections section. 2 states in the nation, New Jersey and Michigan, have been delegated authority over Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. Therefore, in the Michigan statute, we have our own definition of wetlands. So the federal government essentially butchering the definition of what constitutes as a protected wetland will not change the way that our state defines protected wetland or how Eagle defines protected wetland and how Eagle, Eagle runs their whole Part 303 program in terms of you have to get a permit to fill the majority of wetlands. So good news in that respect. The bad news is it sets a poor precedent when every other state is going to start deregulating wetlands. It pushes Michigan to it. We know we're going to see an attack for Michigan to do the same, to follow suit.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
problematic because, water's connected. So all the wetlands in all of the neighboring Great Lakes states are going to be further under threat. And then finally, there are some portions of it that I'm still struggling to understand, but let's say, so that's all I should say. We don't exactly know how it's going to work in terms of like if a citizen Clean Water Act suit goes to federal court, like does that impede our ability to fight for some legal protections? I guess I don't want to say any more than that because I'm not a lawyer, but I think we're still understanding the total impact. It's not great. We think the impact is probably less severe than other states, but it's no good. The second decision was no good. I heard some statistic. I was just at a Great Lakes Waterkeeper Alliance, so all the Great Lakes Waterkeepers conference in Detroit this week. And something like 50% of the nation's wetlands are now not going to be protected. Or potentially, we'll see how things play out in the courtroom.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
That's a huge issue.
yeah, that just ruined my Saturday, but
Not good
yeah.
at all.
Yeah, Peachy has a question too.
Yeah, I was fascinated by your Great Lakes watershed map and then by our local watershed map. And how are they defined and who does the definition of the different watersheds?
Yeah, good question. They're defined by topography. So, right, everything you're looking at like topography and everything that's sloped down towards water is going to go to a centralized area. So they're essentially defined by the way rain or snow falls to the ground, which direction it's going to go. And those watersheds, I believe, are delineated by the United States Geological Survey, USGS.
Kate has a question too. Kate?
Yeah, Heather, is there any way, or do you currently get notification from Eagle if someone has applied for a permit to fill an area? And can townships get on some kind of notification list if there are permit requests to fill wetlands, et cetera?
Yeah, good question. The answer is yes, mostly. So Eagle has several different categories of permits. There's major permit project, which has to go out to public notice. I believe townships are one of the bodies that tend to get notified. But then there are general permit categories and minor permit categories that don't have a public comment period. And I don't think there's any sort of notification for those, unfortunately. And surprisingly, lots happens under those more minor permit categories, which I'm going to argue are not minor because it's like a death by 1,000 cuts, right? If we continue to take a little bit of wetland here, a little bit of wetland there, or a little bit of shoreline hardening here, a little bit there. So Eagle does have a portal where you can find all sorts of information, including all of their permits, anything that's up for public notice. It's called My Enviro portal. So if you Google that in your search engine, you should find that. Then there's a way to sign up for notifications when an application goes to public comment. And Kate, if you need me to email you a link and walk you through that, I'm happy to do that too.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can probably find it.
I think Tim is raising his hand.
Yeah, Heather, how are we looking for PFAS in the bay here?
How are we looking? Was that your question?
Yeah, what's the situation like?
Yeah.
Are you seeing a lot of it, or is it minor?
No, so far we haven't found any PFAS and have not been detected in Grand Traverse Bay that I'm aware of. So community, as you probably know, Michigan has kind of been a leader in PFAS monitoring and PFAS response, PFAS standards, like numeric standards set. Many other states are looking to Michigan. I mean, Michigan kind of did it early, maybe in response to the huge failure in Flint. I don't know. But it required all community water systems to be sampled for PFAS. So like City of Traverse City gets their water from East Bay, and that was sampled for PFAS and has been probably routinely. No detection that I'm aware of in the Bay so far. Of course, we do have sites across the watershed where there have been PFAS. Probably familiar with stuff that was happening in East Bay Township near the old airport, or sorry, the airport, kind of down gradient of that. And then there was a big tire fire out in, was it Grand area, where there was a big PFAS issue as well. So, and a few others that have popped up, but generally we haven't seen alarming or even detect levels of PFAS in the open waters of the Bay that I'm aware of.
Okay. Oh, John Hunter? You're on mute, John. John, you're muted.
Yeah, hey, I still do that once in a while.
I know it's hard.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. I do not live in the Grand Traverse Bay watershed. I'm in the western side of Leelanau County, okay? Closer to Lake Leelanau, across the dividing line. Is there a resource for the western side of Leelanau County?
You know, yes, there are lots of great resources. Well, first and foremost, as Susan knows, even if it's outside of the watershed, I'm happy to, if you have a question about something, I'm available. I might not be able to spend 10 hours, write a letter and go to a public meeting, but I can give you, I'm certainly happy to be a resource for folks wherever, as long as we're all advocating for clean water.
Yeah,
Secondly,
yes, I so appreciate that, Heather. You've been able to do that and like cover the issue.
I'm having trouble hearing Susan.
Yeah, I think Susan's
Cut out.
internet might be
Okay.
shaky.
So there
Yeah.
is, there's Leelanau Clean Water, which is a great resource. Number of organizations have come together. They're great. They're wonderful. If you might be within one of the other watersheds, like the Glen Lake Crystal River watershed, then you have the Glen Lake Association, or the Lake Leelanau watershed, and then you have the Lake Leelanau Association. So there are a number of other folks functioning in Leelanau County doing really great things for water, and there are great resources. But I'm certainly always happy to try to help navigate an issue or share resources that we have as well.
Okay, well, thank you, Heather. We're almost at the witching hour here, so we just have a few more things from Legal Not Indivisible. We hope you have a lovely day, and
Thank you so much.
And I'm hoping I want to learn more about the boot camp, so I'll be talking to you.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you are so welcome.
Thank you.